Welcome to the Leaner, Stronger and Confident as Fuck podcast. Today we are talking about the scale and how to stop letting it sabotage your body transformation journey, which is something that I have seen so many times in the past. And I just want you to have a think back over the years yourself and think, how many times have you stepped on the scale, seen a number that maybe you didn't like, and had your entire day derailed before it was even 8 in the morning? Maybe you were on track all week. You had been training, you got your workouts in, you hit your protein, you had planned your weekend, you feel like you did everything right. And then one number on that dreaded electronic square undid all of that in about 3 seconds. So if that sounds familiar, then this episode is definitely for you. We're going to dive in to how to use the scale more effectively and how to stop letting it sabotage your progress so that you can use it as an effective tool, which it can be, to measure your progress alongside a few other things. And I want to be really clear about something before we dive in. I'm not here to tell you to throw your scales away. Quite the opposite, in fact, because I personally weigh myself every single day, as do my clients. I love data and I love using the scale as a tool as part of how I track my progress for my own journey and for my clients as well. But context is absolutely everything here, because so many women are using the scale without any context at all, which means that one number, when they step on the scale on a random day, can have so much power over their mood, over their decisions, and ultimately their results, which is what we want to avoid. So before we dive into how to see the scale differently so that you can then use it yourself as a neutral tool in your own body transformation, I do want to say this as a bit of a caveat. For some people who either currently have or have a history of eating disorders, stepping on the scale might not be a good idea for them. So I'm not addressing anything like that in this episode. That is outside of my scope of practice, and it's something that needs to be discussed with your individual therapist if that's something that comes up for you. What I am sharing here, though, is about how to approach the scale for women who want to improve their relationship with the scale and who perhaps have had a funky relationship with the scale in the past and they want to work through that. And they just want that piece of equipment to not have as much power over them and know how to use it effectively to be able to get the results that they want. And this includes myself, because I've had a funky relationship with the scale in the past, and pretty much every single woman that I have worked with has as well. This is something that comes up in conversation in pretty much every single coaching relationship that I have with my clients. And so it's completely normal as well if that's something that you've struggled with in the past. But I just want us to kind of take a moment to think about how amazing is it that just this one electronic square can have so much power over us, but it also doesn't have to. And I have completely changed how I see it. And I have worked with clients to be able to do the same as well. So I want to help you do what we can in this episode together. So first of all, let's talk about why the scale can drive us completely crazy during a fat loss phase. So let's go back to that Monday morning. We've had a really solid week. We've trained however many times we said we were going to in our plan. We've hit our calories. We have navigated maybe a meal out at the weekend. We've stayed on track. We feel lighter. Our clothes are fitting better. We can see that definition in our body. Then we step on the scale and it has gone up. Not by a lot. Maybe it's gone up by like half a kilo, which some people might think is a lot, but it's not. It's about 1 pound, but it is up. Or maybe it's just not moved at all for the last few days, even though you feel like you've been doing everything right. And suddenly the entire week feels like it has been a waste. It feels perhaps like you have made absolutely no progress whatsoever. Does this sound familiar as you listen to this? Because this is a scenario that I hear all the time from clients. But this is what I want you to understand. When the number on the scale goes up, that does not mean that you have necessarily gained any fat overnight. And it almost certainly doesn't in pretty much every single case. Most women, first of all, make the mistake of seeing the scale as a measure of body fat alone. And that is the first problem. Because first of all, the scale measures our entire body weight, not just body fat. So it weighs our muscle, yes, our body fat, water. It measures things like food volume in our digestive system, our bones, organs, our blood volume, all of those things combined are what is actually showing up on the scale. And our body weight fluctuates constantly as well. And every single day it can go up and down and all over the place for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with fat gain. So let's go through why some of the reasons of why the scale does fluctuate. And first is a big one, which is water retention. So let's say, for example, the day before you had a meal that was higher in sodium than usual. Maybe you ate out. Certainly if you ate out, there'll be a lot more salt in the food than normally when you cook at home. Maybe you had a higher carbohydrate day the day before. Maybe you're more stressed right now, or you're in a certain phase of your menstrual cycle. Maybe you're bloated from some food that you ate that didn't agree with you. Maybe your body is inflamed from training or an injury. All of these will cause your body to hold onto more water, and that water shows up on the scale. Just like if I stood on the scale right now and it said whatever number it said, and then I stood on it holding a glass of water, it would weigh more. This is exactly the same thing that's happening in when we, have water retention in our bodies, and yet we read so much into it. And then there's digestion, because when we have more food going through our system, let's say we just had a higher calorie day for whatever reason the day before, whether it was planned or unplanned, all of that as it moves through your digestive system shows up on the scale as well. And if you haven't been to the bathroom yet that day, that's going to be in your body too. And simply, if you did eat just a bigger meal late at night the night before, then that is also going to show up on the scale, because that food is still passing through your digestive system. And all of that weighs something. Then when it comes to carbohydrates, for every gram of glycogen your body stores, it holds roughly about 3 grams of water alongside it. So if you had a higher carb day, even if it was perfectly unplanned, exactly as you meant to, then the scale will likely be up slightly the next day because of water retention. And I touched on this briefly, but this is really important to mention because it plays such a big part in water retention. Poor sleep and high stress elevate cortisol. Cortisol will cause water retention. It's not bad, it's how your body naturally responds to this elevated hormone. So a bad night's sleep can genuinely make the scale go up, even though you might be doing everything right when it comes to a fat loss process. And that can just simply mask the fat loss that can be happening underneath as you go through your deficit journey. But if we just pay so much attention to the scale and nothing else, it can completely derail us if we let it, because we think nothing's happening, but really our body's just storing water. And then when you train hard as well, if you are weight training, then your muscles can retain water as part of the repair process. So a really good workout can also make the scale go up temporarily. None of these things I've just mentioned are anything to do with fat gain, but all of them show up on the scale. And that is why one single weigh-in tells you almost nothing. It is completely useless data. What matters is the trend of the scale over time as a tool for measuring our progress. Not one number on a random Tuesday or a Saturday, is the weekly average over time. We want to look at the direction things are moving over weeks and months. And so we also want to give ourselves consistent data to be able to read, which I'm going to go into in a moment. But this is where it gets really important, because it's not just that the scale obsession makes us kind of feel bad if it's not going in the right direction as we might hope if we're working on fat loss, for example. It can end up making your results worse, because if the scale doesn't move or if it goes up, most women do one of two things. They either panic and then restrict harder, thinking now I need to slash my calories even more, I need to add more cardio, I need to go more aggressive, this isn't working. Or they spiral, feel like nothing is working, so what is the point? I'm just going to give up. Both of these responses, while they might sound logical, they are not going to get you to your goal. Because if you're in a fat loss phase and the scale stalls for a week, that does not automatically mean that you need to suddenly eat less and cut your calories, or that nothing is working. It can simply mean that your body is just retaining water. And it might mean that maybe you're more stressed and you just need to give it some time, focus on a bit of stress management and just staying consistent. And what can often happen is you'll find that after, a few days, you'll see another drop on the scale. And it will actually show the progress is that is being made all along, but can be masked by water retention. But if you react by slashing your calories every single time the scale doesn't move, you can end up in this cycle of just trying to eat less and less, and that can negatively impact your results by multiple different ways. But one of them is by causing muscle loss if you go too low without eating the right amount of protein and strength training properly as well. Or it can just make you really, really hungry, and that can backfire a few days later. Maybe you end up going completely off the deep end and eating loads of foods because you were so hungry because you'd restricted too much for a few days. Or if you react by giving up every time the scale isn't moving, or perhaps if it goes in the wrong direction for a few days, you will never be consistent long enough to actually see the results. And because you think nothing's working and then you end up just completely doing whatever you want, it's not the fact that nothing was working that was the problem. It was the fact that your response to it actually caused you to lose progress. And I've worked with so many women who are making genuinely really good progress, losing fat, building strength, changing their body composition, but they couldn't see it because they were fixated on a number that wasn't moving fast enough. Now, we've been able to work through it and be able to then stay consistent long enough to be able to see, okay, if we just stay consistent, the scale will drop again. And of course, sometimes, even if we're being consistent, we might need to make some changes because if, for example, your targets are wrong, then changes might need to be made. But making reactive changes by trying to just massively slash our calories or by just giving up entirely is never going to be the right answer. And so many people as well have the wrong expectations of how much they think they should be losing in a fat loss phase, and this also trips them up. So a good rate of progress to look out for in your own fat loss phase is about 0.5 to 1% of your body weight loss a week on the scale. But there is so much nuance to even that statement alone. Because let's say someone is newer to weight training and they are learning to train effectively alongside being in a deficit. That person might have more chance of body recomping successfully. And that means losing fat and gaining some muscle at the same time. So the scale for that person might not move as much. That doesn't mean that they're not making great progress on their goals. And if you're someone who is already lean but trying to get leaner, the scale might also not go down too much, even because you don't have too much to lose. And because if you are already lean trying to get leaner, you need to be really, really, really careful about holding on to your muscle, even more than someone who has more weight to lose. It's important for everyone in a fat loss phase, but especially if you're trying to lose those last 5 to 10 pounds. And the scale going down is not a good thing if you are losing muscle or if it's just water. And again, so many people just think the scale going down is success. The scale going up is bad, but that's just not true because like I said, if it is muscle then that's not a good thing if we're losing it. And if it's water, then that's just kind of part of our body processes and it's neutral really. And so many people, when they start something like keto or a low carb diet and they see the scale go down within the first couple of weeks and they think, oh, this is working. But what's happened is because you've drastically cut carbs out of your diet, your body is releasing the water that was then stored in your muscles. And so you have this big whoosh effect that shows up as a reduction on the scale. And most people think, well, that means I'm losing fat, but it's not, it's just water. And so when people start eating carbs again, they automatically see that come back on the scale and again think it's bad that it's fat gain, and it's not. It's just the water being stored in our body. And that's why it's not that the scale is useless, it's just that we need to understand exactly how to read it. And fat loss really isn't linear. It is a slow and steady process that, depending on the size of your deficits, can obviously go faster or slower depending on the approach that you're using. But for many people that I've seen, because I track data with all of my clients, some people, the scale doesn't drop for a few days and then we end up seeing a big drop. Or sometimes it kind of stalls for a whole week and then a big drop. And the whole nuance to this is knowing when you need to stay consistent, when you need to hold, and when you need to make a smart adjustment to continue to see progress again. The most important thing I talk to all of my clients about, and obviously if they are one-on-one coaching with me, I make the decisions for them and with them. And with group coaching, I help them learn how to make the decisions for themselves. But something I'm saying to all of them is we don't want to do it in a reactive way. We want to make sure the data is good, be super accurate with our tracking, make sure we're being honest with the things that we're tracking, that we're actually hitting our targets. And then if things aren't working and they have actually plateaued, which is nothing changing on measurements, photos, and the scale for about 2 weeks, that's when we need to make an adjustment. Not just, nothing's not worked for a couple of days, or I had one random spike and then change everything, which is something that I see so many people trying to do. But these are some things that I hear people say It's just not true when it comes to the scale that I wanted to clear up in this episode too. So I often hear people say, well, I know muscle weighs more than fat, and so if I'm looking for body composition, then it's okay if the scale doesn't move. But that's not true. A pound of muscle weighs exactly the same as a pound of fat. Both weigh 1 pound, but the difference is that muscle is much denser than fat, so it takes up less space on the body. That's why if you have lost fat and gained muscle, your measurements can go down, your clothes can fit better, you can feel tighter and smaller and more defined, even if the scale hasn't changed much. And the other thing that people get confused with is some people say, oh, well, I want to turn my fat into muscle, but that's not something that can happen either. The two are completely different tissues with different structures and different functions. We can reduce body fat and we can gain muscle. That's it. They do not turn into each other. But I've also heard some people say to me, oh, I know the scale doesn't matter, if they're on a body transformation journey. But I don't agree with that one either, because the scale really is a helpful tool to be able to measure progress with both fat loss, maintenance, and muscle building. It's just not that helpful in isolation or when used poorly. And here's the other way that the scale can completely sabotage us if we let it. It can also make us terrified of doing the things that will actually get you the result that you want. For example, building muscle. Yes, if your goal is a building phase to build muscle, to look more toned and defined, the scale might go up if you are adding muscle tissue to your body. Eating at maintenance to restore your metabolic health. If you are increasing your calories, the scale will probably go up from the end of a deficit because of having more food in your system, as well as having more water stored in your muscles from eating more carbs and things like that. So the scale might go up, but that doesn't mean it's anything to do with fat gain. Again, if you need to focus on eating more carbohydrates to actually fuel your training, the scale might go up slightly because of the water retention in your muscles. Again, nothing to do with fat gain. So if you're making every single decision based on keeping that number as low as possible because you feel like you have to weigh that exact number, then you will constantly undermine the exact things that your body needs to change. Because if you are focused on a body composition journey, then I want you to not fixate on a number on the scale, but think about how you actually feel in your body and in your clothes and how strong you are, and think about, having that right amount of kind of just feeling like defined. It's a look rather than it being a specific number on the scale. So let's zoom out, because the scale is about so much more than just fat loss as well. Because if you've been following me for a while, you know that I always talk about the full transformation cycle: fat loss, building muscle, and maintenance, not just endless dieting. We need all of those things as a full transformation. So in a fat loss phase, of course, we do expect the scale to go downward over time in a trend. But just as we've covered, it's not going to go down in just like a straight line all the time. It's going to fluctuate still on that journey. It will stall. Sometimes it will go up before it goes down. This is completely normal. So we need to understand that that is part of the journey in fat loss too. In a building phase where you are eating at or very slightly above maintenance to support muscle growth, the scale can stay relatively stable and then start to trend slightly upwards. And that, again, is the goal for that phase. But for so many women who have spent years trying to keep the scale as low as possible, this can feel terrifying and can stop them from even committing to even building muscle, which can often be the thing that will actually drastically improve their physique. And then in a maintenance phase, the scale should stay within a normal range of fluctuation, but it's not perfectly static. So we shouldn't expect it to be completely flat in maintenance. Again, it's going to go up and down, but we want to hold it within a consistent window over time if we are maintaining. Because sometimes I hear people say to me that they've been in a maintenance phase and the scale's been going up consistently. And then it's like, well, you're not in maintenance then. You've pushed into a surplus. So understanding what the scale should be doing within a range of each phase is really important to then be able to use it as a tool to help you achieve whatever it is that you're looking to achieve. So the scale is just one data point. So in a body transformation journey, there are some other things that we really want to track as well. The first is progress photos. These are one of the most powerful tools you'll have. And if you go to my Instagram, Kathy Morton Fitness, you'll be able to see a post that I shared very recently about how in this photo shoot prep that I've been doing for the first pretty much like 12 weeks, the scale for me has just gone down on average by 1 kilo, and that's only been in the last couple of weeks. And yet my body has changed over those last 12 weeks. I've got visibly leaner, I have built some more muscle, I've definitely reduced some body fat. And so if I was just judging it by the scale, I could think, oh, nothing's really happened. But my body feels completely different now, and the progress photos show it. So I always recommend with my clients doing progress photos at least every 4 weeks. In fat loss, I tend to do them more often, and it really depends what phase you're in as to how often you should do them. But they're really important to do as part of your journey, because sometimes you can't see things that are showing up on the scale, or you're perhaps like not looking at things when you're seeing yourself in the mirror, because we all can look at ourselves in the mirror with quite critical eyes. So progress photos can be a really good way of objectively seeing the changes that are actually happening. But we want to make sure we're doing the progress photos in the same conditions, in the same lighting, first thing in the morning, ideally, before having eaten or drinking much, had anything to eat or drink, I should say, and really kind of making sure that they're consistent with the same state of dress in a nice light room. And I always like to do a flexed pose as well as a relaxed pose, so that you can also be able to see the muscle definition coming through too. And then when it comes to measurements, I do full body measurements with my clients every single week as well. And these are really important because sometimes they can show progress is happening when the scale is not. For example, one of my clients that I've been working on a fat loss phase with right now, she has been incredibly stressed with some work things that she's been going through. And so the scale has not been moving that much for her, but her measurements have been going consistently down. And in progress photos, she's getting visibly leaner. So the fat loss phase is working. It's just not being shown on the scale just yet. So measurements are such an important part of the journey, whether you are doing focusing on fat loss, maintenance, or muscle building, all really important. Looking at your strength and training performance is also super important, because we want to see that trending up over time, or at least staying steady when you're in a deficit. Holding your strength and training performance in a deficit can be sometimes the most effective way to make sure you're kind of holding on to your muscle mass in that journey. We still want to be pushing for those measurements for our strength metrics to go up when we're in a deficit, but at least holding them steady is going to be really helpful. And then in other phases, when you're at maintenance or in muscle building, definitely seeing them trend up is going to be a clear indication as well that you are hopefully building muscle. And then looking at how your clothes fit as well. It sounds so simple, but it is a really great way to be able to measure your progress as well. These can be really good signs that you are seeing the results you want, whether it is, again, fat loss, muscle building, or maintenance. So I personally, for my own journey as well, track all of these alongside daily scale weighing. So doing the scale daily is one of the best ways to actually use that tool effectively to be able to gather data. So again, with all of my clients, I do this too. We hop on the scale first thing in the morning, ideally naked, and before eating or drinking anything. So after going to the loo, it's the most consistent time of the day to do it for all of us. And then making a note of it. And then I always say to my clients, if they forget it that day for some reason, then don't even bother stepping on it later, because it's inconsistent data. That is the only time that we want to do it. First thing in the morning, as soon as you have woken up, basically after going to the bathroom. And in doing so, then we want to start taking the average across the week. So one data point doesn't mean anything. We do it every single day and then look at the average for the week and then compare that to not just the week before, but the weeks before that as well. And so all of my clients get a tracker where we're able to see this really clearly. And then we need to know what exactly we're looking for, if we are obviously in maintenance, in fat loss, or if we are building muscle. And then we want to use that scale data alongside our photos, measurements, strength, and how our clothes fit to be able to get that clear picture of exactly what is going on and whether we're seeing the progress that we want. And then you can use that data to be able to make smart decisions if you need to make an adjustment, because you know exactly what you're looking for and you're not just going off some random single data point or how you feel on a certain day. So the scale is a tool, and just like any tool, it is only useful when you know how to use it. And when you use it alongside everything else, not as a singular thing on its own. So that one number on the screen doesn't define your entire progress. It definitely has nothing to do with your worth. It is not just measuring body fat, it is measuring everything else. And that's why we need to understand how to read it. And so your body can be changing in ways that the scale doesn't always catch up to straight away. So we need to just stop letting that one data have so much power over us. And if you need help with that, get a coach, get someone to look at it with you in that more objective fashion. Because sometimes I'll have clients say to me, oh my God, my weight just spiked. And I'll be able to look at their data and I'll be like, yeah, because you just told me you're stressed right now, you had a terrible sleep, and you also went out for dinner and you had a higher, sodium and carb rich meal. Of course it's going to have spiked today. And then sure enough, within a couple of days, it will go down and settle back down to either what it's meant to be in the normal range, or we'll start seeing that progress again if they're in fat loss. So I hope that helps. And I hope that's given you a different perspective on how to actually use the tool, but now you need to go and put it into practice. And daily weighing is one of the best ways to work through any funkiness with the scale, because it allows you to actually learn about your body, because that is what it is teaching you. It's teaching you about the fluctuations of your body over time. And only by doing it daily and developing that relationship with it do we stop fearing it as something that, is telling us about whether we have put on body fat or not. So sometimes the only way is through, and doing it daily is like exposure therapy to be able to get you to learn as much about your body and about how to use that tool in the most efficient way possible. So if you are ready as well to stop guessing and start working on a clear strategy that is built around your body and your goals to achieve the body transformation that you want this year, then apply for coaching with the links below the episode or in my bio if you're listening on Instagram. And thanks so much for listening to this episode. I will look forward to speaking to you in the next one.